The British had warm beds in Philadelphia, fireplaces, full belly, clean uniforms. Meanwhile, just 20 miles away, the Continental Army was about to endure the worst winter of the entire war, not from enemy bullets, but from the cold, hunger, and disease. Now, what happened at Valley Forge nearly destroyed Washington's army, but instead, it forged it. Welcome to our republic.
When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political band,
sailors and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not
Those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
we pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
After the victories at Trenton and Princeton, momentum briefly shifted in America's favor. But by late 1777, the British struck back hard. They captured Philadelphia after the battles of Brandywine and Germantown. Congress fled and the capital fell. George Washington now faced a brutal decision. Where do you place your army for winter? And he chose Valley Forge, a defensible position near key supply routes, at least on paper. Again, it all looked good on paper, right? On December 19th, 1777, about 12,000 men marched in and began building crude log huts. What awaited them was not just winter, it was absolute misery. The conditions in camp were a nightmare. Food was scarce, clothing was nearly non-existent, shoes were so rare that blood trails marked the snow, supplies were trapped in depots due to corruption, mismanagement, and broken supply lines. The official rations often failed to arrive, so men survived on what they called fire cake, a mixture of flour and water baked on stones. But some days, there was nothing at all. Disease exploded through the camp. Typhus, dysentery, pneumonia, smallpox, and by the end of the winter, nearly 2,000 soldiers had died, not in battle, but in their huts. Yet the army did not dissolve. Washington could not fix Congress. He couldn't fix the supply system, but he could hold his army together. He walked the camp daily. He wrote furious letters demanding aid. He refused to abandon his men or dissolve the army. At Valley Forge, Washington stopped being merely a commander, and he became the backbone of the revolution. And then enter Baron von Steuben. In February 1778, a Prussian officer arrived in camp, Baron von Steuben. He barely spoke English. He cussed fluently in German and French, and he transformed the Continental Army. Von Steuben drilled the men relentlessly. How to load and fire by regulation, how to maneuver as units, how to properly use bayonets, how to maintain discipline under fire. He built the first standardized training program in American military history. By spring, that army that limped into Valley Forge looked nothing like the army that marched out. They were no longer a militia, they were professionals. Right? And while the men, this is typical, right? Cowards during these times. While men were freezing at Valley Forge, some politicians, big surprise, back east were plotting to remove Washington from command. A faction of officers and politicians, I can't stand them, known as the Conway Cabal, attempted to undermine him behind closed doors. Washington had big ones. He confronted them directly. He exposed the conspiracy, and he crushed this cabal without firing a shot. And his authority emerged stronger than ever, and that army was willing to follow him anywhere. By May, supplies finally arrived. Training paid off, disease slowed, and with the announcement of France's formal alliance with the colonies, the war was no longer just colonial versus empire, it was now global. When the army marched out of Valley Forge on June 1778, the British officers who faced them at the Battle of Monmouth were stunned. This was no longer a starving mob. This was a disciplined fighting force. Valley Forge had done what no victory ever could. It hardened the army itself. Valley Forge was not the turning point of the war. It was the proving ground for the army. No major battles were fought. No territory was taken. No enemy was defeated, but the Continental Army was reborn. At Valley Forge, again, there were no triumphs, no parade, no cheering crowds. There was only cold, hunger, sickness, and endurance. The revolution did not survive that winter because of strategy or supply lines. It survived because men refused to quit when quitting could have made perfect sense. The army that left Valley Forge would go on to win a nation. That is the American spirit. Oh, I love it. Anyway, thank you for listening. And remember, history is not boring. It is the story of persistence, resilience, faith, and discipline. It is the story of a starving army in a frozen camp that would become the instrument that secures American independence. I will see you next time.